I recognize the Minister of Rural and Remote Health.
Speaker, it's a pleasure to rise in my place this evening and share a few comments about our 2019-20 budget brought forward by our friend, the Minister of Finance, and of course led by our Premier, and seconded by the member for Indian Head Milestone. Of course, as is customary, Mr. Speaker, I want to recognize my family as I begin, and of course, first and foremost, my wife, Leon, of almost 33 years, coming this summer. We've been together almost 39 years, so high school sweethearts, and we've been blessed with a real amazing family, 2 daughters, and of course our son Braden, who we lost in 2000, but is still a big part of our life with fundraising stuff that we do in his memory every year. Our 2 daughters, our oldest one, Caitlin, got married over the last summer, and with that marriage, we gained 2 new granddaughters, Rhea and Malaya, along with son-in-law Mark, who is a project manager for a construction company in Yorkton. Great additions to the family. And of course, our younger daughter, Rayanne, married to Austin Cranville. He's an oil field geologist, works around Torquay at this time, and he's been keeping himself really busy, along with building themselves their dream home just outside of Yorkton. We get to visit with them quite a bit and enjoy our grandchildren, Winslet, who is turning 4 tomorrow, and Otto, who turns 1 on the 5th of April. And they're going to grace us with another grandchild this coming October, so we're really looking forward to that addition to the family, Mr. Speaker. And they really are a blessing. They're just a real grounding force when I get back home, and of course always supportive. And Wynn's kind of up on the FaceTime now, so quite often she'll be FaceTiming Grandpa at maybe inopportune times, but I'm always quick to grab that call and have a little chat with her. She's going to be smart as a little whip and a real good source of information sometimes as well. When it comes to staff, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the staff in this building that supports both the Rural Health Office and the Minister of Health's office, I'll let him get into some of his comments tomorrow probably, acknowledging his staff, but of course my Chief of Staff, Adam Nelson, just joined us. He's been doing a really great job, and our new admin, Abby, is doing a great job. Whitney Kelsch, our caseworker, Carter Zazula, my communications MA's always got my back, and he's looking after me, keeping me on course. I think he's actually watching tonight with his pajama pants on, so I can see you. He's a real hard worker, and really happy to have him in our office. I'm get punchy at night, Mr. Speaker. Constituency assistants back home, Mr. Speaker. Loretta Rich McGuinness has been with me for over 12 years. She was with Bob Brenrod and Melville Solcoats previous to that for about 12 years or so. So she's served in that capacity. I think one of the second longest CAs in the province, I believe, if not very close to it, and really serves the office well. She's become a very close friend of mine as well, Mr. Speaker, but really serves the constituency of Yorkton, as well as Rochelle Sawatsky, who has been with us for a number of years in Yorkton. And you know, what I've noticed between the two of them, they share a lot of skill set, but they also complement each other, where one is maybe slightly weaker, although I'd be hard-pressed to figure out where they're weak, but where one might be weaker, the other one backs the other one up, and they just do an amazing amount of work, and of course serve the constituents of Yorkton very well. And with that, I really have to thank the constituents of Yorkton. Coming to the end of my 3rd term here and looking forward to a 4th term. I've been nominated for that 4th term, and things are looking pretty positive. You never know, but looking forward to serving possibly another term for the constituents of Yorkton. And of course, that doesn't happen without the volunteers with the Constituency Association and those that have supported me over the last, more than 12 years, because I was nominated for a couple of years before that. So I've had a lot of hard workers that have kept me here all that time, and I'm really appreciative of all of them. Of course, my colleagues on this side of the floor, previous colleagues I'll touch on in a bit, but also colleagues that are here now. Our new Premier served just over a year, and I think the polling numbers are out today, Mr. Speaker, and amazing numbers that he is attaining. And I think a lot of it comes from how he carries himself, his intelligence, and just his ability to interact with people. But he's very, very approachable, and I think a lot of people just see him as just a huggable dad. Is the type of fella he is. So he's really a very warm individual that is approachable, and people are really starting to get to know our Premier very well. Of course, all the colleagues I have on this side of the House, my colleague, the member for Rosetown, the Minister of Health, is an amazing partner to work with in this building. Our offices work very close. We know each other's files pretty well, but we kind of specialize in different areas, and we are a very good team, and we're complemented again by our office staff that do a really good job in supporting us. You know, the executive and staff and all the frontline workers through the Saskatchewan Health Authority. We've been through quite a time over the last year or so, year and a bit, transitioning to this new single health authority, and there's a few issues rise from time to time, but Mr. Deputy Speaker, I can say that we're very impressed with the team that's been put together through Scott Livingston and all the VPs and the executive directors and all the staff below there. And of course, all the way through the front lines, we wouldn't be able to do our jobs without the exemplary performance of all those dedicated professionals throughout the system, Mr. Speaker. Of course, I talked a bit about our Premier. You know, he's became an MLA in 2011. I recognized pretty quickly with his portfolios that he held, you know, representing Saskatchewan on the provincial, the federal, the national stage was something that was very recognized, and of course his skill set has done nothing but get greater and improve over the last number of months and year, and he's really grown into an amazing Premier that leads this province with dignity and strength and knowledge, and we're very, very blessed to have him, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear.
You know, I've had the pleasure to serve in this place since 2007 now, and I'd be remiss if I didn't kind of refer at least briefly to our former Premier, Brad Wall. He's continued to be a good friend. We stay in touch. You know, I bounce things off him from time to time, and he just is an amazing fella, and it's just great to see him kind of move on to the next part of his career with his consulting work. With his, apparently he hosted Gormley today. I kind of listened to a bit of that. It was a fun listen, but just the respectful way that he does whatever he does with the utmost skill and dedication to doing the best job possible, which was an example of what he did here and what he's continuing to do on in his life, whether he's in his business or interacting with his family or just being a representative of the province and still standing for Saskatchewan values, Mr. Speaker. So we're just very blessed to have had his leadership over the years and the leadership that we have now. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this budget represents a decade of hard work, and it's been very responsible, I think, for the most part, and a strong commitment to the people of Saskatchewan. And of course, we know we've been faced with a lot of challenges over the last number of years. The downturn in the resource sector, $1.3 billion annually. So we had to do a lot of changes, a lot of you know, significant policy decisions and strong, tough decisions we had to make to continue to keep us as close to balance as possible. But of course, we know that the economic slowdown continued. It hit our energy sector, our mining sector, even our agriculture to a certain extent. And now we know with some of the challenges we have around the world with trade issues, that's hitting our agriculture even harder. But you know, we're a resilient bunch, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And with the partnership of those in the province that have had to make some concessions and accept some of the challenges that we've been facing, we've come to a point now over the 3-year plan that was, of course, put in place 3 years ago by Premier Wall and carried through with this team, and of course brought home to where we are today with the final budget that we're delivering this year, with a balanced budget, again brought forward by our Minister of Finance from Humboldt and seconded by our member from Indian Head, Milestone, who is just an amazing, knowledgeable asset in this House, and of course I think a friend to all of us here as well. So just a real strong voice to those here. Mr. Speaker, you know, I'm proud to be part of a government that's committed to braving these headwinds and standing strong for our province and against the obstacles like we've having to deal with, like the federal Trudeau carbon tax, or you know, the trade issues that we have no control over, Mr. Speaker. So I'm very proud of our team addressing these challenges, and I know that this budget shows the government, unlike the opposition, we don't want to saddle our children with future challenges, and it's balanced. It's got investments in infrastructure. Of course, we can talk about, you know, general revenue and summary financial statements and how that all plays out. You know, formerly we were under the general accounting practices, where it's basically like a checkbook, money in, money out, not saddled or not having to report all the debt of our third-party partners and those outside of some of our direct control. So now that we have to add all those up and continuing to add up with some of the investments that our Crown corporations are making, is what shows this perceived increase in debt. And yeah, there's increase in debt, Mr. Speaker, but again, there's been an example that's been explained through a lot of the speeches that I've heard throughout the last little while. It's like having a mortgage. So I mean, the spending and the expenditures are balanced. We're investing in our Crown corporations. We know that if we're going to continue to invest the billions of dollars that's needed in those Crowns to keep them strong, the only way other than that is to increase rates, and we don't want to increase rates to the point of being unaffordable. So, of course, we have to do the borrowing through the Crowns and invest in some of these initiatives and some of the other infrastructure that we need to deliver these services to the people of the province. And, Mr. Speaker, what do we see from across the floor is the no darn plan party again. I know the new leader came up with about a $10 billion spend over, I think it's 4 years. Some great ideas for sure, but where does that money come from, Mr. Deputy Speaker? Future spending to exorbitant values, amounts, but no plan to pay that back. So we've got some definite questions when it comes to some of the plans that they put forward. But of course, we've made difficult decisions, but they've been necessary to get the province back on track, get back to balance, and we believe this is the right balance for Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker. Of course, this wouldn't be possible with the previous leadership. I mentioned Premier Brad Wall, our former Premier, but also I know Kevin has been mentioned a couple times to the House here, Kevin Doherty. He did a lot of heavy lifting over a couple of years to make sure that we got this plan in place, and faced a lot of criticism, I believe. Did a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of good work. And of course, over the last couple of years, our finance minister from Humboldt has done an amazing job carrying through, leading Treasury Board. And Mr. Speaker, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the members of Treasury Board. I know firsthand the amount of work that they do. It's an amazing amount of work. And to bring us to a point with all the analysis and the questions that they ask the different ministers and ministries, to bring us to this point of this budget is no small feat. So we're very thankful to them, and also, of course, Kevin Doherty, who has moved on to the private sector, and very thankful again for the leadership of our team here, Mr. Speaker. So, when I think about our Premier and our Finance Minister, Treasury Board, and this team over here, but specifically the leadership, we can look at the steady hand, the strong leadership, the sensible approach, and of course the commitment to that 3-year plan that has brought us to where we are with this balanced budget, Mr. Speaker. So you look at where we've come from, a have-not province in 2007 when the Sask Party took office, to now in 2019, a balanced budget, and one of the only AAA credit ratings in our country, Mr. Speaker. We have one of the highest debt-to-GDP ratios in Canada, billions in infrastructure spending, a really loud member from Saskatoon City Centre, no new taxes, no tax increases, and Mr. Speaker, when we look at some of the criticism on the PST and such, Mr. Speaker, we look at the housing markets, for example, and sure, the PST on construction labor did have a little bit of an impact. When we look at the housing market as a whole, you look at the used housing market, no PST on that, it's still soft, Mr. Speaker. So we know, although some of the decisions we made had some impact, and we'll own that, we also know that the federal stress test for mortgages and for first-time home buyers and home buyers has had a heck of an effect on them. And Mr. Speaker, that's something that we recognize as well. So of course, when we look at the strong fiscal management, all the while holding that with the record-breaking investment in some of these crucial areas, Mr. Speaker, I just want to quickly focus on some of those as I start trying to wind some of this up. We look at, I'll just go kind of high level on most of this, but we look at health, Mr. Speaker, $5.89 billion. It's a 2.9% increase over last year, the largest health budget in the history of this province. That's a 60% increase since 2007. That's reflective in mental health, addictions, as well as health. Mr. Speaker, $30 million this year to mental health and addictions, which I know some of the members were talking about some of the third-party partners out there that would criticize some of the spending on mental health, and some of those very impressed with some of the feedback we've gotten, where they will agree, we need to continue down this road, but they're very impressed with the investments this year, where it's being spent, and the impacts that they're very hopeful it's going to have. So again, $30 million increase to mental health and addictions for $402 million total mental health and addictions plan, which brings us very close to that 7%. But when we look at government-wide, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when we look at the farm stress line, we look at the supports through the education system, advanced education, throughout the services of government, we're looking at about a 7.5% spend on mental health and addiction. So, Mr. Speaker, we're on the right track. When we look at through some of the other ministries, whether it's education, social services, again, some of the best and largest investments that we've seen in in history, Mr. Speaker, and some of those. And I'm not going to delve too much into the details of some of these, but we've heard about the 140 new mental health and addictions beds, and that's rural, northern, and urban, Mr. Speaker. Something that isn't in this budget, we invested with the Lac La Ronge Indian Band to invest in 10 more addiction beds in the partnership with them. And of course, we look at, has been spoken about at length, so I won't delve into it too deep either. But the additional money for the operating of Saskatchewan Hospital North Battleford, which is the largest investment in mental health infrastructure in this province's history. We look at the continued investment, the Shock Trauma Air Rescue Society, our STARS program, commitment for more new helicopters, and 10 years longer commitment to 2030. We look at the Jim Pattison Children's Hospital. I know my friend, the member for Saskatoon University, did a very good job of talking about that, Mr. Speaker. But that was something very special to me. It was the first project that I got to turn dirt on when I became Rural Health Minister about 4.5 years ago. I think this week would be about 4.5 years. But for me, it was quite an eventful day as well, because as we were turning sod, I was looking up to the third floor, which would be Peds 3000, which is where our son got his cancer treatment and surgery recovery back in, would have been 98, 99, and 2000. And where that hospital is built is what he would call his car collection. He would look out there and it looked like a matchbox set with the parking lot. And, 15 years after that, after the loss of his battle, to be able to turn dirt on the site that was very special to him, that's going to serve children for decades and decades into the future, is something that's very special that I think we can all be very proud of, that investment, Mr. Speaker. We can look at over $8 million in new funding and new supports for a variety of different areas. We've heard about the provincial organ donor registry money, the money that's going to Meadow Lake facility for the new long-term care facility, the one facility we promised a number of years back. We never quite got it started. This year we're getting it started. We're going to get that built for the people of Meadow Lake. I had a visit there just a few short months ago prior to final approval, and it was very evident it needed to be done, Mr. Speaker. So we're very thankful to the community and, of course, the local MLA, the member for Meadow Lake, for the patients, but now we're going to get that facility started. Of course, Mr. Speaker, we heard about the Weyburn and the Prince Albert Victoria Hospital money, $5 million for to get towards the completion of the finalization for both of those, Mr. Speaker. In that announcement, I want to touch on as quickly as I possibly can my own facility in Yorkton. I heard a lot of, what about Yorkton? We know PA is important, all the rest of it. Mr. Speaker, from my point of view, I'm the MLA for Yorkton, a very important facility to get that built. It's been in various stages of consideration over the last 10 years or so that I've been elected. What I realized a couple of years back, a few years ago, and I know my fellow ministers probably had the same recollection or realization when you look at that infrastructure list, PA serves a very specific purpose to the north, about the same age as the Yorkton facility, but it's got a great purpose ahead when we get that built to start doing a lot of the work, a lot of the services for those people in the north that don't want to be traveling to Saskatoon, which will help, of course, offload some of those increased capacity issues that we have to deal with in Saskatoon. So that's a very important facility. We've got to get that one out the door here fairly soon. Weyburn, I got my tonsils out in that facility in 1969, and my election back then, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it wasn't good then. So it's great that we're getting that out the door. I've never made a specific commitment to when Yorkton will be done, but it does need to be done. It's not a matter of if, it's when. And it was always realized that those are probably some of the top 3 regional projects. So PA is getting done, Weyburn's getting done, and I can just keep advocating for my own hospital in Yorkton, which I know will be coming in the future. It's been a great honor to be a health minister, but of course that's not the only area that we've seen these significant increases, and of course I touched on education and social services. But also, Mr. Speaker, I think I heard the comments from maybe the member from Fairview about Grenfell not in the budget, and Pioneer Village is also, not specifically in the budget, Mr. Speaker, but those are commitments we made to replace. I got some feedback from some of the leadership in Grenfell. They were actually listening to the member for Fairview, and I'm not sure what she was saying. I never heard all the comments, but all they said was, that's factually incorrect. So I'm not sure, I'd have to replay what she had to say, but they were a little bit put back with some of her comments. But we do know that, Mr. Speaker, once those RFPs are done and come back, then we'll know the direction we're moving forward, but we have committed to publicly funded long-term care for both those facilities, including Grenfell. So that will happen, and we'll have those plans set out probably by summertime. You know, I wanted to just touch on the Fight Commission report one more time. I know the member from Rosemont, he criticized us a number of months ago, might have been about a year ago or so, about, you know, this health panel report on restructure, just dust off the Fight Commission report. Mr. Speaker, I want to point out again that the Fight Commission report, if you read it, I don't think the member from Rosemont read it, I think he's maybe read it now, it called for the closing of 50 to 70 more long-term and care facilities and hospitals, Mr. Speaker. That's not what this government is doing. We're building new facilities, opening new facilities, including provincial facilities and local facilities and regional facilities. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we're not dusting off the Fight Commission report. The NDP can put that in their campaign platform. We're building this province. We're building the healthcare system. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I talked about education, $2.48 billion investment this year, a huge amount of investments all the way through infrastructure programs, largest ever budget. Social services, $1.23 billion, Mr. Speaker, largest social services budget from what I've been told. We look at my friend from Estevan, the Minister of Highways, the multiple investments in safety improvement, infrastructure improvement, a record of $9 billion in highways and infrastructure since 2008, 14,000 kilometres of highways, Mr. Speaker. I think it points to our commitment for infrastructure in this province. I've often said, you know, to people, would you like it if we spent the whole fuel tax on infrastructure? Well, that'd be great. Well, under the NDP, I think it was somewhere between 25 to 50% of the fuel tax is spent on highways and infrastructure. Under this government, we've continued to exceed the fuel tax intake, sometimes doubling that intake of fuel tax to invest back in infrastructure. We're going to continue to do that. And of course, in the wake of the tragedy at Humboldt bus crash, we're now delivering on a lot of these promises and a lot of these concerns that have been talked about, Mr. Speaker. So as I'm kind of wrapping up here, I just want to touch on a few investments in my home constituency of Yorkton. The $1.2 million in family services money, which is going to fund 18 different facilities, walk-in services. SIGN and Yorkton Society for Involvement of Good Neighbours has been doing that service for a number of years, and they're very excited about that investment. I know firsthand the work that they've been doing with mental health and addictions walk-in, and we can only anticipate how much that's going to impact the whole province when we get 18 of those opened up throughout the province. Mr. Speaker, the Alzheimer's Society First Link program up to this point hasn't been available in Yorkton. Now it will be. It's very exciting news. The Saskatchewan Cancer Agency increase is something that's very close to my heart and my family's heart as well. Recruitment money, coverage for drugs, Mr. Speaker. It's just going to strengthen that organization even more, and we do know that we have some of the best cancer care in the country. You know, overhaul and increases for income exemption calculations, third-party party agencies that deliver services on behalf of social services. The CBO is $5.9 million increase, $27 million for at-risk children and families, $6.6 million to adults with intellectual disabilities. The construction of the passing lanes are coming to Melville, Yorkton, Yorkton, Kenora this year, which is something the community is very excited about, as well as a commitment Highways has made is to work with the RM of Orkney to upgrade Grain Millers Road to heavy haul gravel status, and then eventually the RM wanting to pave that. So, you know, for the most part, continuing completing that truck reliever route around our city and increasing the economic availability of expansion with grain millers and the canola plants, P&H elevator, and all those ones that may develop along there, Mr. Speaker. So, you know, we know there's going to be increases to intersection safety improvement, signage, sightlines, lighting, rumble strips, and of course the member from Saskatoon University talked about revenue sharing. I know the City of Yorkton is benefiting from our revenue sharing, Mr. Speaker. So, in closing, you know, I look forward to continued work with the SHA, my legislative colleagues. I commend the work of all of our leaders throughout the province. I'm excited for our future budgets. We're on the right path. And to borrow from our former Premier Brad Wallen, to channel our friend, Lord rest his soul, Yogi Hugaber, the New Democratic Party. They're not very new, they're not democratic, and there's not much of a party going on over there, Mr. Speaker. But, you know, the one thing that I continue, it burnt in my mind, and it kind of brings everything to roost quite often, Mr. Speaker. And my friend from Rosemont, you know, I love him, he's a good friend. But something he said, we were at an I don't know if he remembers this, I don't know if I ever told him this. We were at our Social Sciences Teachers Institute, and both of us were private members, and and we're speaking to 15 or 20 teachers, and we flipped a coin to see who goes first, and the member from Rosemont, he won the toss, so he's going first. And you know, Mr. Speaker, his quote, his comment burnt into my mind, and I thought, you know, this is kind of the philosophy of the NDP, and we've heard it in some of the replies. It's kind of negative and whatever else, and you know, fair enough, they're to oppose, they're to criticize. But what he said to those group of teachers was, social New Democrats are critical, negative by nature. We believe the end is always justified by the means. And Mr. Speaker, that just really struck me as odd. It's burnt in my mind. I remember, I can still see his face saying that, and I don't know, I don't get it, but I can see in some of the responses that's kind of their philosophy. But Mr. Speaker, I just want to close by saying I will definitely support the motion moved by our Minister of Finance, brought forward by our Minister of Finance, seconded by the member for Indian Head, Milestone. I will not be supporting the amendment.